Our dead matter. Can you imagine? Jeremy and I were talking about this yesterday. Over 1 million plus dead. And we're moving about as if it doesn't matter. Where are our national rituals of grief? Think about all of the anniversaries of death that are happening right now because of the same thing. And you combine it with the anger and the hatred and what we see and what we experience. Think about all the things that we have to endure, all the things that we have to endure as hatred seems to overwhelm and overrun everything. You know this in South Carolina. Hatred, which can destroy so much, corrodes and corrupts the soul. And for Baldwin, as I read him here, the path to the other side of madness involves accepting the world for what it is, to not be naive about the failings and beauty of men and women, to not fall privy to the sirens who sing of race and its enchanting fantasies, but to fight with all your strength against the injustices of the world and what that evil has placed inside of you. Two things: accept the world for what it is. Not naively. Accept the world for what it is, and to fight with all your strength against the injustices in that world and the evil that has been deposited in you. Now, of course, Baldwin's view will evolve. I write about this in Begin Again, and it's on sale right outside past. No, I'm just kidding. To reference that consumerist ethic, right? Of course, his view will evolve. This is early Baldwin, Notes of a Native Son. He's a young man. He's still in his 20s. He hasn't witnessed yet the murder of Medgar Evers, the assassination of Malcolm and Martin. He hasn't seen the country turn its back on all of those young people who risked everything in the bowels of the South to get the country to live up to its creed. But the rage in his blood he had identified in 1955, bless you, the rage in his blood he identified in 1955, that blind fever kept coming back until the day he took his last breath. Why? Why? Because these people want to be white still in order to justify the slaughter, in order to justify the crime. Now, what must we do in the face of this bleak picture? How might we imagine a new America and keep the madness at bay? What might I mean by America's salvation? The late historian Vincent Harding asked the question, is America possible? Is America possible? And he claimed that the answer could be found in those unwritten stories I talked about last night. Right? But Harding wants us also to understand something more fundamental as the ground for our imagination. Not only those unwritten stories, that vernacular space where democracy is vibrant, where the kind of categories of race do not get in the way of our living together. And we see it in our popular forms. We hear it in the sounds that make up this place, right? We're not talking about that. He also wants us to understand something more fundamental as the ground for our imagining. And here he reaches for Langston Hughes. Just a stanza. Oh, let America be America again. The land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free. The land that never has been yet. Ellison would say, as I said last night, that America has yet to discover itself, and that the tricky magic seeks to mask that fact, right? Baldwin would make a similar point, as I said last night, about the price of the ticket. But Harding's answer to the question rests with the imagination. The dream makers vested with the sacrifice of those who have struggled for a more just world. America is possible if we imagine it so. America is possible if we imagine it so. Harding writes, quote, "I hear all the heroic voices of struggle joining hues in a common message. It says loudly that the work of discovering, the work of exploring and developing this true America is our work. We, the people, are in charge," end quote. This work of the moral imagination is critical to the task that has fallen into our hands. Thinking right now, the quotation from Frantz Fanon comes to mind. Each generation out of relative obscurity must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it. It's in our hands, as Toni Morrison said in her Nobel lecture to those young people who are trying to imagine what's their charge. This work of the moral imagination is critical to the task that's in front of us. Moral imagination can be thought of in a number of ways. The scholar David Bromwich offers a compelling genealogy of the phrase, which traces its emergence in the words of Edmund Burke, its use in the poems of Wordsworth and Shelley, to its enactment in the witness of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Bromwich powerfully emphasizes that feature of moral imagination, which insists that, quote, "justice to a stranger comes to seem a more profound work of conscience than justice to a friend, than justice to a neighbor or a member of our own community," end quote. For him, and I believe Bromwich is right here, the use of moral imagination is to gauge the, quote, "self-deception that intervenes when in the parent service of high-minded aims we come to describe our appetites as needs," end quote. Moral imagination serves as a source of resistance to self-deception. When our manners or our habits or of self-regard warp our conduct towards others, we think we're being decent when in fact you know you're not. You think you're virtuous when in fact you are drowning in vice. When you think you're committed to justice when in fact, right, you're engaged in philanthropic gestures and charitable enterprises. You're not fundamentally changing the order of things. You have conceded to the world as it is. When our manners or our habits of self-regard warp our conduct towards others. One of the most dangerous features of our current political moment is the toxic combination of hatred and greed and selfishness. Hatred and greed and selfishness leads to a kind of indifference that allows us to what? Be okay in the midst of suffering. To be fine with the world as it is, as long as your world is okay. But for my purposes here, there's much more to be said about that. But for my purposes this morning, Bromwich distinguishes one of the two important dimensions of moral imagination. Imagination as an act of sympathy or empathy. The philosopher John Dewey maintained in his Ethics that, quote, "a person entirely lacking in sympathetic response might have a keen calculating intellect, but he would have no spontaneous sense of the claims of others for satisfaction of their desires." He goes on to say that, quote, "a person of narrow sympathy is of necessity a person of confined outlook upon the scene of human good, to put ourselves in the place of others, to see things from the standpoint of their purposes and values, to humble our own pretensions and claims till they reach the level they would assume in the eye of an impartial, sympathetic observer, is the surest way to attain objectivity of moral knowledge." He says, sympathy is the animating mold of moral judgment. Sympathy is the animating mold of moral judgment. This aspect of the imagination, that the standing of others draws us beyond ourselves into the orbit of the aspiration, interest, and fears of others, is necessary but not sufficient for moral judgment. Imagination also involves our capacity to see the possibilities interwoven within the texture of the actual, to glimpse the as yet. So we need to be sympathetic because sympathy, what? Draws us out of ourselves and draws us toward another. It's critical for the imagination to work, right? What happens to us when you see Tamir Rice and you think you see a 21-year-old? What has happened to us when you open your door and you see a 16-year-old and you see a 6'2", hulking, threatening black man and you shoot him in the head as he's just trying to find his brothers on 115th Street in Terrace, but he goes to 115th Street instead. Sympathy allows us to sympathy draws us out of ourselves toward the other, but that's not sufficient. It's necessary. Imagination also involves our capacity to see the possibilities interwoven within the texture of the actual, to glimpse the as yet. It is, as I said last night to echo Shelley, the chief instrument of the good. Imagination guides our attention beyond the immediately experienced so that we can take heed of those lessons of the past as we take in those as yet realized possibilities that attend any problematic situation. It is in this sense that the imagination, in my view, acquires its prophetic quality, that the sense of the as yet realized possibility that may indeed be realized, in contrast to the actual conditions of our living, can be the basis of criticism of current social and political arrangements, and perhaps more importantly, can be the basis of a passionate creation of the self, a passionate creation of a world beyond the confines and strictures of the world we presently inhabit. In short, we must be able to imagine America that is not yet been discovered, has not yet been discovered, an America that is not yet in existence. We must be able to imagine it anew if it is to be saved.